Today's figures from the central bank are not uplifting. The domestic economy will remain in recession and forecasts for growth are shrinking. Life is tough under the Troika, so how would we manage under the new fiscal treaty? Controversially, it requires us to adhere to strict rules on our structural deficit. That's our deficit over an economic cycle. But can we really keep to those rules, and at what cost to us?
The treaty itself, in effect, is like knocking somebody onto the ground and continuing hammering them.
We don't want to hand a huge amount of debt onto our children, so we're going to have to get those high debt levels down.
The fiscal treaty says governments can only run structural deficits equal to 0.5% of GDP. This means that governments will only be able to spend what they earn, which has huge implications for public expenditure.
This year, we are the worst performers in the Eurozone in terms of structural deficits. Not in terms of actual deficits, but in terms of structural deficits. IMF estimates the structural deficit in Ireland for this year to be around 5.5% of GDP. If you take this estimate and you apply to it the reduction required under the fiscal compact, what you're arriving at is that the Irish government would have to take out of the economy somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.5, maybe 8 billion, depending on which basis you use, 8 billion euros out of the economy overnight. This would be equivalent to pushing this economy into recession instantaneously.
At today's joint Oireachtas Committee on European Affairs, deputies and senators asked a panel of experts how the fiscal treaty would affect our spending, or more to the point, how much more we might have to cut back.
The balanced budget rule implies additional fiscal adjustment efforts will likely be required for several years after 2015 to bring the structural deficit below 0.5% of GDP. Adhering to the treaty's balanced budget rules will be challenging. It is important to note, however, that fiscal consolidation at the pace and scale demanded by the rule is probably necessary in any event.
Under the terms of the fiscal treaty, countries with debts greater than 60% of GDP will have 20 years to reduce those debts. In Ireland's case, our debt is forecast to peak at 118% of GDP next year. This means that over the next 20 years we'll have to dramatically pay down this debt or hopefully grow our way out. But can we actually do this?
The European Union will require the countries who have public debt to GDP ratio in excess of 60% to reduce that debt towards the target every year by 5% or 1/20. In the Irish case, if you take last year, it would have cost Irish economy about 2.35 billion euros. This year, it would be closer to about 3.5. And at the peak of our debt, expected peak of our debt in 2013, it will be running closer to 5 billion euros.
Back at today's Oireachtas Committee hearing, concerns about the implications of the new rules were echoed.
The proposed 1/20th rule would kick in as soon as Ireland left the EU IMF programme of assistance. The debt to GDP ratio is likely to peak at approximately 120% of GDP. Reducing the excess at the rate implied by the 1/20th rule will choke off any nascent recovery in the Irish economy.
The effect of the fiscal treaty on our economy may be unnerving, but it seems our choices are limited.
Although I think the economics of this treaty are pretty terrible, on balance I think the arguments favour Ireland signing up for it. Our current debt ratio is so high that we are set for a long period of tight fiscal policy with limited or no room for the use of counter-cyclical fiscal policy. So in the medium term, we're going to have to do what we have to do anyway.
Even if we accept the pain the treaty might cause, will it be enough to save our ailing economy?
There needs to be something else over the next few months to try to stimulate growth in the euro area. Part of that may come from a euro area-wide fiscal stimulus or from more monetary easing by the ECB. But this treaty itself is necessary, but it's not sufficient to get us out of this crisis.